So we are moving now as well on YouTube. We are on YouTube now. So welcome for this match between the University of Melbourne and Makerere University. So a team from Australia and a team from Uganda for this match organized for the UGA Inter-University Law Debate Tournament, which is indeed organized from the Coax Foundation here in the Netherlands. So for today we'll have as well, we have as well the host who is just connecting, but I can already give the floor to the organizers and as well the participants. So Miss Muntaunu, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Laurent, and hi everyone, and welcome to today's match. It is indeed a pleasure to have you with us today. Good luck, and we'll for sure see each other more.
Thank you. Miss Urbanova?
Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Again, best of luck to both teams participating in today's match. On our side, we'll do our best to help you co-manage the time. We have our timekeeper who will be giving out notification when 30 seconds are left of speaking time and when the time is up. And our co-host will be giving you the floor as the match progresses.
Thank you. And now I will ask my colleague, Mr. Mutui, to introduce himself, and he will be hosting the match, so he will give the floor as well to the teams to introduce themselves. So, Mr. Mutui?
Yes, hello, good afternoon, good morning. I'm Jacqueline Mutui. I'm a final year bachelor student at the Hague University of Applied Sciences, and I'm specializing in EU law. So now we'll go with the presentation of each participant. So let's start with Ghazal Fashion. Can you please briefly introduce yourself?
Everyone, this is Ghazal, and I'm a second-year JD student from the University of Melbourne, and I'm so glad to be here and looking forward to this competition.
Mr. Angelos Sevanonda.
I think he's not yet connected, so you can...
yeah. All right. So, Mr. Ben Kingston.
Yeah, my name is Ben. I'm a first-year law student at the University of Melbourne, and yeah, I'm stoked to be here.
Then Asasira Anita.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Asasira Anita Faith, and I am a third-year law student at Makerere University.
And Ms. Meg Stevens.
Hi everyone, I'm Meg. I'm a first-year student at Melbourne University, and I'm really excited to be part of the competition.
And finally, Fortunate Okello.
Hello, I don't know what time it is. It's morning this side. So my name is Fortunate Okello. I am a third-year law student at Makerere University, and I am happy to be part of this competition. Thank you.
Thank you. Now that we all know a bit each other, now Mr. Laurent is going to determine the position of each team.
Yes, so the topic for this match today was education must not be defined by gender. So this is a topic which has been...
Excuse me?
The topic for today...
Me?
Yes, tell me.
Excuse me?
Yes.
Can you just give me a minute to get our other teammate online? He seems to be having issues.
Yes, sure.
Yes, of course.
Let me try to call him directly.
Yes. So in the meanwhile, before we draw the position, give some information, background information, and as soon as there will be the third team member, we'll start to drawing the positions. So yes, the topic was on education must not be defined by gender. So this topic has been sent by email 10 days ago. Both teams had to prepare this topic. They will have two possibilities, so they could be in favor of the topic today or against. So in a few seconds we'll be drawing the positions, so randomly with a randomizer. And what will happen afterwards is both teams will have 5 minutes to review their notes based on the position just assigned, and after that we'll start the match. So this match actually is part of the group phase, which will have 4 teams, so one from Uganda, Makerere University, one from Australia, the University of Melbourne, but as well the University of Singapore, and as well Shu University in Japan. So these 4 universities are starting the competition. So we had already the first match between Shu and Singapore on Saturday. Now it will be the match between Makerere and Melbourne, and afterwards, of course, the next days will be the match between the other teams between them. Mr. Okello?
Yeah, I think we can make the toss now. He says he'll be here in a minute.
Okay, so I will share my screen and we'll proceed to the toss. So you will see in a few seconds a wheel on your screen. So this is a wheel where there are 2 possibilities for the University of Melbourne in favor and against, and 2 possibilities for Makerere University in favor and against. So I just have to click and we'll know the result. So here, the positions which will be assigned is that Makerere University will be against. So it means that Makerere University will defend the position that education must be defined by gender. And of course, as a consequence, the University of Melbourne will be defending the position that education must not be defined by gender. Okay? So, Melbourne, education must not be defined by gender, and Makerere University, education must be defined by gender. So my colleague will share the screen as well to give you the 5 minutes countdown for your preparation. During these 5 minutes you can close your camera if you wish to review your notes, and after 5 minutes we start the match.
Thank you, everyone. The timer for 5 minutes has now passed.
Yes. So we'll begin with the match.
Wait, just to double check, because Makerere University, you are supposed to be 3 members. Can you confirm what's the situation for your 3rd member?
Mr. Okello? Can you hear us, Mr. Okello?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes. So are you going to compete only 2, or the 3rd member will join?
I don't know. I'm calling him and he's saying he's coming online, but he's taking a bit of time.
Okay.
Let me call him again.
Yes. But we have to start the match.
Sorry, meanwhile, I was wondering if I could ask a question about timing.
Yes. Yes.
So now from the recordings, you told that we can allocate some of the leftover times from some of our rebuts to the other or to our conclusion. What if our first rebut is longer than the second and our conclusion? Can we go over for our first rebut and then compensate that over time in our second and then conclusion by having less?
Thank you very much for asking this question. Actually, under the current format, it's not possible to transfer the time between different speaking positions. So indeed, only for the opening, you only have 4 minutes. And for the rebuttals, for each of the 2 positions, you only have 2 minutes. And same for the conclusion, you again only have 2 minutes. It's not possible to move the time between the positions. Thank you very much for checking.
I see
Thank
that.
you.
I see that Mr. Angelo Sewananda is connected. Can you hear us? Mr. Sewananda, we have to start. Well, I think we'll have to start because otherwise we'll go over time as well for the match. So, yes.
First of all, can all of you open your camera? Mr. Okello, Ms. Faith?
Yes.
Yeah. And Mr. Sivananda, if you can hear us, please open your camera as well.
Yes, I can hear you.
Ah, right. But we can't see you.
Well, let's start the match.
All
still.
right.
Yeah.
So now we will begin with the opening statement from Makerere University. You have 4 minutes. The floor is yours. The Makerere University.
So we're starting in Makerere University.
I'm starting. Am I audible?
Yes, please.
Yes.
Start.
All right. So how will I know the timing?
Yes, please start.
How will I know the timing?
You have 4 minutes.
No, like, is someone going to be timing in the chat space,
Yes,
or I will
yes.
have to time myself?
Yes. No,
Yes, we have a timekeeper. Ms. Montano will show you 30 seconds notification with yellow placard and red
All right.
notification.
I will be beginning in a minute.
No.
Right. Okay, so education must not be defined, must not be defined by gender, right? So what does this essentially look like, right? From side proposition, we seem to think that in the enforcement of academic standards by schooling institutions, right, there should be a non-conformity to multiple gender identities that institutions tend to attach to individuals, right? We think this looks like this looks like schools trying to attach genders like male and female to individuals who, through the conduct of their education, right? We think from side proposition, right, that the system of education that we need to have is one which does not recognize the existence of these genders, right, for a couple of reasons, right? The first one is that the recognition of these genders, which tends to most cases tend to be defined by the gender binary, seems to enforce the narrative that individuals only exist within the confines of male and female, right? Why do we think this is essentially a bad thing, right? We think the side effect of this is that a significant number of individuals who do not subscribe to the gender binary tend to be excluded from these existing structures. What does this look like in the long term, right? That individuals who do not subscribe to these particular groupings tend to feel left out by the system because they are not recognized by a significant majority of the institutions which seem to give education services to children and things like that. The long term, this means that a lot of people either do not go to school, or in case they do go to school, they do drop out, right? So why do we then still think, okay, so why do we think, a couple of arguments from us, why do we think that education must not be defined along gender lines? The first thing you're going to get from us is the idea of gender identity, right? That gender identity in the present world is subjective based on an individual's perception of what they are, right? So the world that we presently live in is not that which is the same as we had probably 50 or 100 years ago, where at birth you were attached to a particular gender based on your physical attributes, and that you were meant to subscribe to that until the day you die, right? We think we likely live in a world where we are more progressive and more willing to accept that regardless of someone's physical attributes, they can subscribe to a gender which does not necessarily have to be male or female, but it might exist outside the confines of the binary and within the confines of the spectrum, which allows for people who are non-binary and gender non-conforming to exist within the broader aspect, right? So the enforcement of the idea that we have to constantly have standards of male and female, right, or we have to constantly attach gender to individuals, as they are, and the impact, which most might not want to admit to it, but the natural consequences that individuals who do not subscribe to these two genders are pushed out of the system because they feel discriminated against. Why is this a bad thing from our side of the house? Two reasons. The first one is that it affects the performance of individuals who subscribe to other genders which are not male and female. But secondly, it affects the growth of these particular individuals on a broader scale. That means they are more likely not to perform not only in school, but they are less likely to become social in the outside world, right? Because what happens in schools tends to affect what happens on the bigger aspect of the world, right? Another thing you get from us under this is that this affects how employment later turns out, in the bigger world, right? Say, for example, people who are in schools definitely turn out to be the people who are going to employ others long term, right? That means if you enforce the idea of constantly defining people by gender and constantly reinforcing it in school, right, you will have individuals who, when they get into the job market, have the same narrative implanted in them. That means they are less likely to employ individuals, or they are less likely to associate with individuals who do not subscribe along those two lines, right? So we tell you it stands to disadvantage individuals who are not within the gender who do not exist within the gender binary at even a much bigger scale on a societal level, right? But then we also tell you, in regards to everyday life, individuals' participation in things like sports and cultural traditions are affected because they do not exist within the confines of what society have gotten used to and what they like. From side proposition, we tell you the best way to resolve some of these issues is by not speaking to this and allowing individuals to simply interact with each other on a basis whereby they look at each other as human beings and not necessarily male, female, non-binary or anything. Like the long-term effects of this is that individuals are more accepting of each other and they are willing to work together to meet common ground on a lot of other things, right? The second argument you specifically get from us is in regards to how this redefines the education system and benefits broader society. You will get that from Anita and Angelo in the long term. Thank you.
Thank you. And now for your opening statement. You have 4 minutes. I give the floor to the University of Melbourne.
Yep, thank you. So I'll go with the affirmative argument. Often we assume that all children have the opportunity to go to school and pursue their dreams. However, for 129 million young girls across the world, this is not the case, according to UNICEF. One of the most ratified Human Rights Treaties, which is the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, has been ratified by over 180 countries. However, one section where access access continues to be defined by gender is education. And this is evident in the worryingly feminized phenomenon of illiteracy. Due to the failure to ensure education is not defined by gender, of the 750 million adults globally who are illiterate, 2/3 are women. In the last 50 years, the international community has made significant strides towards ensuring education is accessible, regardless of gender. Today, more than 90% young women between the ages of 15 and 24 are literate, compared to only 73% of women over the age of 65. This progress has been particularly remarkable in the regions of Southern Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa, where female literacy has progressed from only about 25% of women 50 years ago to 86% today, according to UNESCO. In order to further address these issues and increase the statistics stated earlier, we believe that education must be provided universally regardless of one's gender, and gender should not be considered or taken into account when it comes to access to education. And we'll argue that, first of all, everyone should be free to participate in their field of interest regardless of their gender. We should provide education to everyone free of any pre-established biases. And secondly, defining access to education by gender would eliminate those who do not fit into the certain categories defined gender categories. Then we consider how even if there needs to be some mechanism in place to help the current under or over representation of certain genders in certain fields, it should not be placed at the access to education stage. And finally, we consider how we need to come up with approaches that can address this issue more fundamentally by evaluating our own biases, educating people from early on, and for not having or forming these internal biases, and or putting more strict mechanism later on in the hiring procedures in certain industries where the gap exists. We would like to acknowledge that as we had to rely on current statistics and that there are heavily focused on binary categories of gender, we might not have drawn as much attention on non-binary categories, unfortunately, which itself shows how the gendered approach towards education must be misguided. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now the Makerere University, you have 2 minutes for your first rebuttal.
Good morning once again. Our line of argument in rebuttal to the proposition team is that we need to accept that we have multiple gender identities in the education system. Contrary to the proposition that 2 out of 3 of illiterates are women, and young women are discriminated against in the education system, we as the opposition opine that gender biases must be recognized and must be combated. How will they be combated? They will be combated by living in the truth as it stands. The truth is that right now we largely operate on a binary gendered education system. However, we as the opposition believe that we need to accept that this gendered binary structure needs to collapse. We need to accept gender minorities on top of women are being discriminated, because the alternative to this is that we live in denial of the truth as it stands. The alternative is to pretend that it is not, and yet it is in fact quite real. Children should be conditioned from an early age to accept their differences as they come, and a classroom that celebrates these differences is the best way to achieve this. We hope to see a classroom in which both men, women, and gender minorities are recognized equally, celebrated for their differences, and upheld. We as the opposition believe that students from an early age will have lives entirely apart from their school lives. If they do not get their gender education from school, they are going to come to school with preconditioned negative gender stereotypes that need to be combated with a fully structured, inclusive education. Thank you very much.
Thank you. At the University of Melbourne, you have 2 minutes for your first.
Only through taking a non-gendered approach to education can we combat gender inequality. Only in 49% of countries do girls and boys attend primary school at the same rate, with the gap widening to only 24% at the secondary level. Poverty is a pivotal factor affecting girls' education, with parents with limited resources still being more likely to prioritize educating their sons than their daughters. Unequal divisions of household labor further restricts girls' ability to learn, with UNICEF finding that globally girls spend 40% more time on household chores than boys. Boys also benefit from a non-gendered approach to education. Negative gender norms can perpetrate toxic cultures of masculinity, which can feed disengagement from school and encourage boys to partake in violent activities. For example, during the civil war in Sierra Leone in the 1990s, youth who had no education male youth who had no education were 9 times more likely to join rebel or counter-rebel groups than those with post-primary education. Ensuring that education is not defined by gender can contribute towards reducing gender-based violence and harmful practices. The German Foundation for World Population found that if all girls had secondary education in sub-Saharan Africa, rates of child marriage would fall by 64%. Educated women are more likely to take a greater economic role in their families and communities, and they tend to reinvest 90% of what they earn into their families. Additionally, while our opposition mentions people outside the gender binary, this actually supports our argument, as defining education by gender would eliminate those who do not fit into the gender binary. This population, according to the World Economic Forum, is as much as 4% of young people around the world. As awareness and acceptance of gender diversity continues to grow, it will be increasingly important to ensure those outside the gender binary are not excluded from gender definitions of education. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, the Makerere University, you have the floor. For your second rebuttal, you have 2 minutes.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes.
All right, great. I'll be starting now. Panel, we have to recognize 2 things. First of all, the question of inequality. In which world do we better realize that particular inequality, right? The question is inequality better solved within a world where we do not actually realize that there are differences in gender, or is it better solved in a world where people are actually cognizant of this particular differences and therefore do something to address that particular gap, right? We think that the question of inequality hinges on the fact that in sub-Saharan Africa and the greater parts of Africa and Asia and South America, the majority of people that do not have access to education are actually females, right? A world that does not recognize that difference in gender is a world that is unable to solve that particular gender. It's a world that is blind to the plight of those particular girls and women around the world, right? We think that an education system that is actually gendered and recognizes these particular aspects of gender and these particular differences is better equipped to actually do something to solve those particular problems, right? Now, when the proposition team tells us that it is actually more likely within the world that will actually achieve an better education for people, we do not agree with that, right? We think that for us to actually solve the problem that is actually happening right now, we must actually realize the inequality that exists, and that inequality is that people are actually less likely to access education because of their gender, and therefore we must actually recognize that those people must be given some sort of affirmative action in order to solve that particular lag or that particular gap in the system that stands currently. And that is something that the proposition case does not tell us how they will solve, right? I rest.
Thank you. And now I call the University of Melbourne for their second rebuttal. You have 2 minutes.
Thanks. I would like to begin with everyone asking themselves, what would it mean to have all genders, whether male, female, or non-binary, equally represented in the tech industry, in government, as world leaders? What would be different? And I note that the other group has spoken about how we need to recognize a world which doesn't recognize gender. And we believe that. And that is exactly why it is essential that we tackle the relevant issue at the source. The issue is that if education is not defined by gender, we can change the world itself. It will mean that no one approaches women, men, non-binary identifying people with different preconditions and biases. And what that means is everyone has equal access to approach education in any which way they choose, pursuant to their interests and pursuant to their ability, not pursuant to their gender. I also want to note that the other group considered the spectrum of all genders and how with our approach they may be disregarded, but I think it's our approach that is actually arguing against discriminating in such a nature. If we take gender out of education, then no one is going to be pushing their premonitions on male identifying, female identifying, non-binary identifying, but rather education will be considered holistically and equally for every single person, regardless of their gender. We are seeking to take gender outside of education and therefore change the world that we exist in so that people aren't pushed in any specific area because of their gender. And we think that by taking a gendered approach to education, you're only reinforcing a system which is broken and which isolates people based on their gender or their non-identifying gender. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now I call the Makerere University for the conclusion. You have 2 minutes.
All right. So at the first point where the other team loses out from is the failure to recognize the fact that we have multiple people who do not subscribe to the gender binary, right? So they actively fail to engage us on the best way forward to ensure that these gender minority groups actually have access to the best education, right? From our side, we tell you that the world in which we envision is one where individuals have access to all forms of education, regardless of the fact that they subscribe to a particular gender, right? So, but even to take them at their best, right? The arguments that they front on the narrative of male-female that in most of the developing countries, women do not have access to education, right? Angelo engages them in that particular world and shows them why we even still win in that particular regard by demonstrating to them that the best course of action is to ensure that we have affirmative action for these particular individuals, to acknowledge the fact that something needs to actively be done to ensure that they are put in a much better position than they would actually be in, right? That failure to recognize this fact is what puts these minority groups and women at large, because they are on the idea of women, right? But like we tell you that from our side, what we are doing serves to not only also benefit other minority groups, right? The failure of the other team to recognize the fact that we have minority groups is the point at which they actually lose out in today's round, right? Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, the University of Melbourne, you have the floor for your conclusion. You have 2 minutes.
If we define education by gender, everyone suffers. We have demonstrated this through outlining the impact that gender has on accessing education and the severe negative repercussions that are being felt globally as a result of gendered exclusion. Further, defining access to education by gender risks erasing those who do not fit into the gender binary, a group that will continue to grow into the future. Finally, we asserted we need a deeper engagement with the issue of gender inequality in education than the gendered approach that is advocated for by the opposition, one that is enabled to envision people of all genders being able to participate equally in the classroom. We should focus on root issues, including combating structural inequality and challenging the biases that continue to be held across the globe. So many of our mothers, our grandmothers, our great-grandmothers were deprived of the opportunity to achieve their potential because their gender prevented them from accessing education. If we want our daughters to have the same opportunities as their brothers, we must work together to erase gendered barriers to education. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And this ends today's debate. Congratulations, well done to you all. Now I'm quite curious, what did you think about today's debate? I start with Ms. Stevens. So can you please reflect on your team's performance and on the opposite team? Yeah, briefly.
I really enjoyed the debate today. Congratulations to the opposition as well. I think we had a really good debate. I really liked our team's performance. I think it was clear that we've got researched our topic. We've took quite a bit of time, talking out this issue from multiple lenses, and it's an issue we're all passionate about. It's obviously one of the most important issues the international community faces at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Okelo, so what did you think about your own team performance and the opposite team, of course?
I think the debate was good in general. I think the opposition team was also good, though I felt they failed to engage us on the idea of minority groups. But I hope we do better in the next round. I hope we did the best we can in this round too. Thank you.
Then Mr. Ben Kingston, so same question. What did you think about your own performance and the other teams?
I thought it was great. I thought we did really well. I thought you guys were amazing. Yeah, it was awesome. I think it's really cool that we get to do this with students from Uganda. It's just like amazing that this competition lets us engage with students across the world. So yeah, I thought everyone was amazing and really appreciative that you guys put this on for us.
Okay. Mr. Sivananda. Are you there?
Pardon?
Yes. So the question is, can you briefly reflect on your team's performance, your own performance, and the opposite team briefly, please?
Oh, all right. Generally, I enjoyed the debate. I thought the other team was really prepared, stats and everything. Yeah, our team was a bit shaky in the beginning, but hopefully we, caught up eventually. Yeah, good debate. See you guys in the next round.
And Ms. Farshin, same question.
Yes, so I'll not reiterate whatever everyone says, although I really enjoyed the competition and I appreciate both our team's effort and the other opposition team's effort. I just wanted to say that I really enjoyed looking at the issue from both perspectives. It was a challenging experience, but I think we all learned a lot and it was a rewarding experience to do so. So thank you for the opportunity.
And last but not least, Ms. Anita Faith.
I'm really glad to have participated in this debate. It was an eye-opening experience, like she said, to see the case argued from both sides. And going forward, I just hope that our team can get better prepared, but good job to the proposition.
On this positive note, this ends today's session. Thank you very much for your participation. And you have your grade from the judges who are unfortunately not here today, but you will get your grade in a couple of days.
Yes, so as mentioned by my colleague, you have a free judge. Each judge will be watching your match, because at this moment they are working, but they will be watching your match during the day or tomorrow. And it means, before the middle of this week, you will get the results sent by email. So it means you will get as well the score sheets with the comments from the judge in your email box to the Ugandese students as well to Australian students. So many thanks again, and we keep in touch for your next round, which will be in 2 weeks, and you will get your topic in the next days for the next match. Thank you again.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.